Altadena community meeting. I believe we are having an audio issue with YouTube and we are working to correct that immediately. For those of you who are on YouTube, we are going to display the Zoom QR code on the screen now, and we encourage you to join us on the Zoom platform to submit your questions in real time. Today we have a few short presentations, and then we will answer questions that have been pre-submitted by our community members. Again, Zoom attendees can submit questions in real time using the question and answer function on your screen. Agency representatives are on the Zoom meeting responding live. Note that questions submitted to the YouTube live chat will not be answered. Give us just one moment and we'll begin. Supervisor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in today to hear more updates about the Eaton fire recovery work that's underway. I want to begin by expressing my continued appreciation for your resilience, your strength, and your commitment to rebuilding. I also want you to know that tomorrow I'm introducing a motion to allocate funding for comprehensive soil testing in some areas affected by the Eaton fire. Last Thursday, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health shared results of independent soil testing efforts in and around the Eaton fire burn area. Higher levels of lead were found in residential areas with intact and undamaged housing, located downwind within 1 mile radius of the burn zone. I am aware some of my constituents want to test their soil, but are worried about the cost and the affordability of testing, and in many cases, insurance will not cover it. My motion will reallocate up to $3 million from the county's lead paint hazard mitigation program to assist residents with the cost of soil testing. If my motion is approved, it will enable the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health to contract with certified laboratories and provide soil testing assistance quickly. My motion will be voted upon during tomorrow's Board of Supervisors meeting, which starts at 9:30 a.m. Before we move forward with this afternoon's updates, I also want to remind property owners who haven't made a decision yet regarding debris removal that the deadline to sign up for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers debris removal program is tomorrow, Tuesday, April 15th. If you are still considering whether to handle debris removal privately or enroll in the Army Corps program, I urge you to make that decision today. Visit recovery.lacounty.gov to fill out the appropriate forms that tell the county what your choice is. We have about 84 property owners who haven't made a decision yet. We need to hear from you. Our county team is here to answer your questions and to help you understand your options. Thank you again for joining the Altadena Recovery Community Meeting today. And believe me, that we are in this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. And we'll go to our first presenter today, Captain Ethan Marquez.
Thank you very much. I just want to report there's been a lot of questions about what the Sheriff's Department is doing in terms of crime mitigation, crime suppression, our efforts here. We still have the home check program. If you haven't enrolled and you're interested in having us periodically check your home, please enroll in the home check program. It's Altadena Home Check at LASD.org. If you do return home, please let us know. You can send us an email, the same email address, and we'll remove you. So we're not spending time going to a house that somebody's living in, because we will assume if we do respond that you're not supposed to be there, and we may question you, detain you, try to figure out what's going on to confirm you're the homeowner. Please, if you're not going to be around for a significant amount of time, let your neighbors know if there's neighbors around. Unfortunately, I have to say that, so that we can prevent squatters from moving in. We have had some in the area, and we've dealt with them appropriately. Also, we want to prevent burglaries. Tomorrow, I'll be meeting with some nonprofits. We're attempting to get some of our corporate partners, kind of tell them what we need in the area to help out with the recovery effort in terms of crime suppression. And so some of the nonprofits are going to be meeting with me to discuss efforts we can use to incorporate the business community and also volunteers to help the community prevent crime in the area. in terms of squatters, trespassing, theft, and burglary. I'm proud to report that we have been working closely with some of our detective units, our Major Crimes Bureau, Auto Theft Ring, and Major Narcotics units to deter some of the crime. We're doing undercover operations. I've mentioned that a few times before. Yesterday, we had a very successful operation. We arrested 15 people, 8 felonies and 7 misdemeanors. We also recovered 1 explosive device, and we've recovered hundreds of pounds of copper and piping and wire in those arrests. So those are just some of the efforts we're using right now to help the community and suppress any kind of crime. People are coming in from around the region. We've even had people from out of state coming in to try to, I guess, take advantage of our residents here, and we're going to prevent that as best we can. If there's any questions, that's all I have to report right now.
Thank you very much. And moving on to our next presenter, Lieutenant Ian O'Sullivan with the Army Corps.
All right. Hey, this is Lieutenant Colonel O'Sullivan. Good afternoon, and thank you, Supervisor, for inviting me to speak today. As of this morning, we had 124 debris removal crews and 77 asbestos abatement crews working in Altadena. This afternoon, we had just over 1,250 final sign-offs completed. We also completed the final inspections this past week at the Las Flores Water Company, Rubio Canyon, and North Coulter reservoirs. In terms of properties cleared of fire ash debris, we're over 2,400 properties, which is an increase of over 500 parcels from last week. I'd also like to reiterate that with the temporary debris staging and reduction site up and running, we'll also save months on the back end of this operation. Our commitment is to be complete by January of 2026. However, we expect the great majority of properties will be complete by late summer or early fall. I'd like to give a brief update on activities regarding the Altadena Golf Course, which we're also calling the temporary debris staging and reduction site. First, we've been operating this site for the past 2 weeks. We continue to process about 150 to 200 trucks worth of material daily, which are concrete, metal, and vegetative debris. The website for the air monitoring stations continues to operate. For instances where we see spikes in particulate matter, we have an on-site air tech or safety person that physically inspects the air monitoring station to determine the cause, and then takes appropriate measures to mitigate any sort of issue as long as it's caused by the site. I would like to note that for particulate matter 2.5 or PM 2.5 and PM 10, the levels can rise based on things like humidity, haze, vehicle emissions, dust, things like lawn mowing, and other environmental factors. We continue to monitor everything closely to ensure our contractors' operations remain safe. Thanks, and that concludes my update.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Chris Shepard with the Department of Public Works.
Thank you very much for having us here this afternoon, Supervisor. Just to provide a quick update on the number of ROEs collected. We've currently received over 10,000 ROEs, right of entry forms, and transmitted 8,900 over to the Army Corps. As the Supervisor previously mentioned, we still have a little over 80 properties that haven't responded. So just wanted to reiterate that due date. Please do submit your ROEs by tomorrow, April 15th, and make sure you get that selection in. If you're still unsure about your selection, again, we're here to answer any questions that may come up, but do opt in, and you can always opt out in the future if you so choose. So please do submit your ROEs and get them in as soon as possible. You can submit them online through the recovery.lacounty.gov website. You can download a PDF and email them in. You can also drop them off at any of the DRC centers, which are still open, and get those ROEs in before the deadline. If you have any questions about the status of your ROE, you can check out the ROE tracker online, which will show you the current status. You can also call our hotline at 844-347-3332, and speak to a case manager about your specific ROE if you have any questions. And that concludes my update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Going now to the California Department of Insurance. Rob, the floor is yours.
Thank you. If you could pull up the slide for the flyer, please. And again, thank you, Supervisor, for having me and giving me the opportunity just to invite everybody to our virtual insurance claims town hall that we're hosting with the Insurance Commissioner, Ricardo Lara, and the Department of Insurance next Tuesday, April 22nd from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. So, over the past few months, we've been seeing a lot of the issues that people have been dealing with respect to things like living expenses, contents coverage, smoke damage, testing, and all sorts of issues that people have been having with their insurance companies. And we're looking to provide an update on some of those issues and guidance on the claims process, some resources from the Department of Insurance, as well as insights into how some of the insurance policies work. Also, as rebuilding it starts to begin and the debris removal is cleared, we know there's going to be a lot of additional issues associated with insurance in the future. So we want to give some insight on what to look out for in the future as well. So please join us next Tuesday. You can use that QR code to register. You can register on our website at insurance.ca.gov or give us a call at 800-927-4357. So thanks. That's the update I have.
Thank you very much. And now we will transition to Dr. Adam Love with RU Inc. on behalf of the Department of Public Health to speak to us about soil testing results.
Great, thank you. As you probably heard last Thursday, we had presented at town hall some of the early results that are coming back from our representative soil sampling, primarily at intact parcels. We've been out there for the last month or so, sampling a whole spectrum of different locations. We've been sampling from parcels that were destroyed before any cleanup has occurred, and we've been referring to that as our stage 1 sampling. We've been sampling from intact parcels, both inside and near the fire areas, which we call our stage 2 sampling. And we've been sampling soils from parcels that were destroyed after the Army Corps performed their soil and debris removal, and that we're calling our stage 3 sampling. The results today are really focused on those stage 2 samples for intact homes. These are homes where they're not slated for remediation, but that people have concerns about what is reasonably expected for intact properties, even after the cleanup. Next slide. So our representative soil sampling is not meant to sample every home. There are just too many homes for us to sample each one. So like I described, we've sort of gone and sampled a sort of representative number throughout the fire area. And we've tested for the chemicals that are most often reported as being associated with wildfires. So we tested for heavy metals. We tested for polyaromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. That's the sort of black burnt material that often happens when you burn something. And we sampled for dioxins, which is another organic chemical that can form during fires. So far, we've gotten about 90% of the data in, but because we started to see patterns that we thought we wanted to communicate as quickly as possible, we put together this sort of initial findings. So why don't we go to the next slide? When we talk about different parcel types that we've sampled that are intact, we have sampled from parcels that were designated as minor or affected damage inside the fire zone. We've sampled from properties that have no damage inside the fire zone. And we've sampled from properties with no damage that are outside but adjacent to these fire areas. And again, we sampled all of these parcels just trying to get a sense for whether or not there are any fire-related impacts that can be detected in soils. Next slide. So our representative sampling was split up amongst both the Eaton and the Palisades fire areas. You can see The figures on the right show green highlighted boxes. Those are locations within the fire zones that had homes that were potentially sampleable. The rest of the areas don't have parcels, residential parcels to sample from. And so we divided our sampling amongst those green parcels where we were able to get access. Overall, we sampled 780 parcels with 5 samples per parcel. So that's almost 4,000 samples split among the 2 fire areas. You can see how that split was in the table at the bottom to know sort of how it was distributed, both in terms of parcel type and the split between Palisades and Eaton. From the data that we got back, what we're talking about today is comparing those results to DTSC's residential soil screening levels. If there are, for certain chemicals, soil screening levels that DTSC doesn't have, we then defaulted to using US EPA's residential screening levels. Next slide. We're using screening levels as an initial filter for understanding the data. And we're looking at it both overall for the entire fire area, as well as looking at the spatial distribution of exceedances based on the grid that I showed in the previous slide. These regulatory soil screening levels are protective for a lifetime of exposure for the most sensitive residential populations, including children and pregnant mothers. And so these screening levels, if you are below the screening level, there is no basis to worry about human health effects. If they are above screening levels are not cleanup levels, but they're thresholds that typically trigger additional evaluation. And so when we look at this data and we talk about exceedances of the soil screening levels, it's important to recognize that those screening levels don't necessarily represent an urgent health effect. It just suggests that more evaluation is necessary. Next slide. So here's the data for Eaton. Now, I talked about measuring metals, PAHs, and dioxins. We measured a much longer list than is shown in this table on this slide with the listing that's on the left. This table only includes chemicals where there was even a single exceedance of a soil screening level. Everything else that we measured didn't have a single exceedance of a soil screening level in either fire area. The way this table is organized is on the left is a list of chemicals, and then each column is a list of the type of sample that the soil was collected from. And when we talk about intact parcels, we're really focused on the columns that are in that red box shown in the table. When looking at the different chemicals and the exceedances, you can see lead has by far the highest number of exceedances in the Eaton fire area. The other chemicals have much, much lower exceedances. 11% I think is the next highest, with most at 5% or less. Now, even with lead, an exceedance level in the 30% or 40% range isn't necessarily abnormal in an area where the housing stock can have lead-based paint on the house. And so those numbers alone weren't anything that necessarily was concerning from being abnormal or being particularly fire-related. But then we started looking at each of these chemicals where we saw a decent number of exceedances geographically. And so the 4 arrows on the left are the 4 chemicals we're going to look at in more detail based on the geographic distribution. Next slide. Here's a map of arsenic. And so the way this map works is the darker the color, the higher the percentage of exceedances over the residential screening level. And so in this case, the overall residential screening level for arsenic was relatively low. It had a high of 11% and a low of about 5.5% for intact homes, But you can see that the distribution of those exceedances is fairly uniform across the fire area. So there's no sort of concentrated area of arsenic exceedances that suggests that these numbers are necessarily particularly fire related. In fact, this percentage of exceedance that we see in this data is actually pretty typical to see in California because natural background levels of arsenic can often exceed what we use for the arsenic screening level of 12 milligrams per kilogram. So seeing these low percentages of exceedances of that screening level is fairly typical in California. Next slide. This is the slide that got our attention. The lead numbers, while I said earlier, at overall percentages in the 30 to 40% range aren't necessarily abnormal. We can see that the distribution of where those exceedances happen is not uniformly distributed. In fact, the highest level of exceedances of the highest percentage of samples with exceedances of the residential screening level are essentially downwind from the main area in Altadena where homes burned. And so if you remember, the winds blew to the south, which on this figure is from the top to the bottom. And you can see as you get outside the fire zone to the bottom, that's where we also see the highest levels of lead. Again, this is not necessarily a surprise. We know that air monitoring after the fires began measured high levels of lead in the air. And we also know that the Altadena community has a housing stock where you would typically see houses with lead-based paint. And so all of these things, when you look at them together, sort of make sense. Next slide. Benzoate pyrene, this is one of those PAHs that I mentioned earlier, the stuff that sort of organic stuff that burns in fires. Again, just like the arsenic, you can see the exceedances are fairly well distributed and nothing that looks particularly uniquely associated with fire-related impacts. Next slide. And dioxins. Dioxins also evenly distributed, doesn't look to be something that is particularly fire-related, as opposed to just sort of the normal distribution of chemicals that can happen on properties throughout a community. Next slide. So overall, the assessment revealed that there's a higher percentage of soil samples from intact parcels that had lead levels above this health-based screening level downwind of the Eaton fire. Again, that finding is consistent with what we know in terms of the age of the housing stock in Altadena and the potential for lead-based paint. And it's also consistent with reports of elevated lead in air samples collected in the days immediately following the fire. Now, these soil impacts from the other potentially fire-related chemicals just weren't evident. Lead seems to be the only chemical in the Eaton fire that has an impact on the community. Next slide. We'll go quickly through the Palisades results. Palisades looked very different than Eaton. If you look at the chemicals that had exceedances in Palisades, there's a different set of chemicals, and you can see the lead levels in Palisades are much, much lower, with lead levels in the 5 to 9% range. Again, we can look at the geographic distribution of those chemicals on the ones that we have arrows next to. Next slide. In this case, in arsenic, you do see some geographic specificity for where the arsenic exceedances are. In this case, in the upper right-hand corner of the fire zone. Not sure what that's from, and it doesn't really look like it would be fire-related because we would expect to see those arsenic impacts more broadly distributed across the fire area. In fact, those exceedances are at the upwind part of the fire area and not the downwind part. So just from looking at the distribution of arsenic, it's not clear that arsenic exceedance is fire-related. Next slide. Cadmium. You can see in the lower left, there seemed to be a cadmium hotspot in the southwest portion of the fire zone, with some elevated areas in the adjacent cells of the grid. Again, this doesn't necessarily seem to be something that is, broadly a fire-related impact from general wildfire smoke. It could represent, again, just a sort of single source of cadmium that could have been either prior to or during the fire released to other properties in the area. Next slide. Lead. In the case of Palisades, you don't see the same sort of downwind impacts of lead that you saw in Eaton. In this case, the lead seems to be fairly uniformly distributed. Next slide. And benzoate pyrene, again, this is one of those PAHs. For the most part, you don't see distribution-wise there being much broad distribution, but interestingly enough, in the northeast corner, you have the highest levels that correspond with the highest levels where we saw arsenic. Again, doesn't seem to be fire-related, especially because it's at the upwind section, but it may be some local source that that is either not fire-related or just locally fire-related impacts in that area. Next slide. So we saw differences between the Eaton and Palisades fire areas in both the chemical type and the pattern of exceedances for soil samples. We did not see the type of widespread contamination from fire-related chemicals in the Palisades area, but instead we saw isolated areas where there's heavy metal and pH concentrations above screening levels, but it's not clear whether any of those impacts are consistent with the fire-related smoke plumes that folks worried about. Next slide. So, what now? This assessment provides a representative analysis of soil conditions for the intact parcels near the fire, but it's important to recognize that individual parcels can have unique factors that result in differences compared to these representative samples. The reported results are not intended to imply cleanup is necessary, but are intended to identify areas where that potentially require additional evaluation. Now, people concerned about their specific property should consult an environmental professional about evaluating their property, and community members are encouraged to take appropriate precautions if your home is in one of the areas where soil sample exceedances of screening thresholds may be observed. And LA County Department of Public Health FAQs lists some best management practices or best practices to minimize exposure to these potential hazards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Love. And we are now moving on to our next presenter, Chloe Height with the McChrystal Group. Chloe, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Supervisor Barger, for having us here again today to spread awareness about the upcoming community listening sessions, and thanks to everyone listening in. If we could just get our slides loaded up, that would be great. And if we can start at the beginning, sorry. Thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Chloe, and I'm here today on behalf of my firm, McChrystal Group, to share some information about the 3 upcoming community listening sessions that our firm is leading, focused on soliciting community input and experiences regarding emergency alerts and evacuation procedures during the recent Eaton fire. So these sessions, for anyone who wasn't here on the 31st, are part of the independent review our McChrystal Group team is conducting after being retained by Los Angeles County to conduct a comprehensive third-party review of emergency alert and evacuation procedures during both the Eaton and the Palisades fires. So as many of you may be aware, this independent review was commissioned following a board motion in January of 2025, led by Supervisor Barger and Supervisor Horvath. So these sessions are specifically designed to spark discussion and gather your feedback about what would have improved your experience with emergency alerts and evacuation procedures during the fire. We will capture your input through a blend of facilitated small and large group discussion that is designed to allow everyone time and space to both reflect and then share their experience in a small group environment. So it's going to look kind of different from probably some of the other community meetings you've been involved in. So with that, the whole goal is that we want to hear your experiences. And with that as our goal, I want to clarify that these sessions are for listening and gathering input from you. The input that we're gathering is specific to your experiences with alerts and evacuations. So just to keep in mind that these are about getting input from you, hearing your experience. These are not information sessions. We're not able to provide updates or answer questions about incidents, response, or recovery. Although the lovely folks here today are providing that to you in these forums. We won't be able to do that because we were not directly involved in incident response or recovery. We're just tasked with this independent review. So we hope that these sessions will provide an opportunity for you to reflect and provide input on your experiences, specifically, again, related to emergency alerts and evacuation, that will then hopefully shape future emergency response systems related to getting those emergency alerts out and evacuations executed. So I just want you to know that the reason we're doing this is because we want to make sure that we have your experiences and feedback informing our findings and recommendations as part of our independent assessment. So that's why we're doing this. So if we could skip to the, actually, let's stay here for a second. You can see on the left, the far right of the slide that we're offering 3 opportunities to participate. So there will be 2 in-person sessions and 1 virtual option. We did that because we know that not everybody is necessarily back home, and we wanted to make sure that there was something accessible for folks who aren't in the Altadena area. So the first 2 sessions are going to be held in person. One will be on April 26th from 11 to 1:30, and the other will be held on May 3rd from 11 to 1:30. And just so that you know, we will be providing ASL interpretation and Spanish interpretation in those sessions to ensure everyone can participate fully. We also acknowledge that this is a very traumatic experience. We know that recalling these events can be traumatic. So with that in mind, we will have Department of Mental Health staff resources on site with us in each session to ensure that we have that support for you as you go through and as we're having these discussions. If we can skip to the next slide, please. So how can you participate? Registration information for both the in-person sessions and the virtual session is being displayed on this slide via the QR codes. This information, along with a little bit more information beyond what I'm sharing today, will be made available through the county's Joint Information Center and on Nextdoor within the next week. We really would love for everyone who plans to attend to register as early as possible if they think that they're going to be able to come, just because that allows us to plan accordingly, make sure that we have enough staff on hand to efficiently and effectively facilitate the discussions that we've had planned. And then for anyone who's unable to access the form via the QR code, I know some people had challenges with that the last time we were here. I will be dropping links to all the registration forms in the chat when I wrap up. If we can skip to the next slide, please. If you cannot attend, we know that not everybody has time. You're obviously very busy in the middle of recovering and rebuilding, and you can't necessarily take the time away. We want to make sure that we offer an option for you to still provide input. So if you're unable to attend any of the sessions, or if you have more to share after you attend one, or maybe you want to provide some advance input, you can do so via the survey that we have here. So that the questions in that survey, it's just 3, it's pretty brief, but it gets at the same types of questions that we'll be asking in the community listening sessions. So with that, I will wrap up. The last thing I will mention is that if you have questions or for whatever reason you can't access the forms, you see at the very bottom of the slide an email where you can reach out to us and we can answer any questions that you might have about the sessions or logistics regarding your attendance. So thank you very much for the time again today, Supervisor. We'll be back next week to kind of give the same information for anyone who might not have caught it this week, and there will be more going out via email and social media this week as well. I will drop those links to register in the chat as well as the link to the survey and wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. And as you work to drop those links into the chat, a reminder to those of you that are on our Zoom, you may submit questions in real time using the Q&A function. All of the many panelists that you see on your screen right now are responding to those questions in real time. So please submit your questions using the Q&A function, and a representative that's on your screen now will work to answer as many of those questions as we can. Going on to our last presenter with SoCal Edison, Carla, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. A big thank you to Supervisor Barger for having us today. We know that this has been a very challenging time for the community, so we're appreciative of the opportunity to be here and share a little bit more of our information on our rebuild. While redesigning and constructing the grid is complex and the timeline is very dynamic, you have our commitment that we will work safely and expeditiously to strengthen the grid and be a dedicated partner in building Altadena back stronger. Can we go to the first slide, please? Or next slide. Just very high level, we've been serving the community for over 100 or nearly 140 years, and we are dedicated to rebuilding with a focus on resiliency, adaptation, and future electrical demand. Oh, apologies. Slide number 2, please. There we go. We wanted to just thank those who have shared their feedback already. Since January, SCE has facilitated a few listening sessions, focus groups, community meetings, and educational tours that have provided us with some information on rebuilding. We've engaged with some stakeholders, including customers, elected officials, local businesses, community organizations, and clergy members. These discussions will continue as we refine our efforts to reconstruct and improve our infrastructure. So big thank you for the feedback that you continue to provide on our rebuild plans. Since January, we've also restored power to all customers who've been able to take service safely through upgraded or temporary infrastructure. And we did receive a question in the chat that I wanted to answer live on whether we will be restoring temporary power before undergrounding the gorge circuit in North Altadena and power poles that are no longer there, street lights with no power. So I did just want to say that we are getting requests for temporary power poles for customers that are currently rebuilding, and we are fulfilling those requests as we receive them. The installation of street lights is very important to us. And we are working with LA County Public Works to restore the SCE-owned streetlights and energize the county streetlights. As of April 3rd, we've completed the inventory of all our streetlights, determined which ones need repairs, and we'll continue to prioritize the routes provided by the county and looking into the county-owned streetlights that are missing the power source and prioritizing those as well. So just answering that for awareness. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Robert, who will be updating on our specific plans to underground.
Thank you, Carla. I am Robert Preston Lloyd, a principal manager in system planning and engineering. Next slide. Okay, so on Friday, 4/11, we actually released our response to Governor Newsom's letter. And so a lot of this information is in that letter. And so if you look at the map on the right, this map shows you Altadena, and this is actually from the damage inspection database. And so each home is a dot, essentially, or all the structures are dots. And so this just kind of gives you a representation of kind of what we were looking at in terms of how we built our rebuild plan. In the yellow shaded areas, we're doing about 40 miles of undergrounding. And we've already started the 2 miles of undergrounding on the East Loma Alta Drive and Sunny Oak Circle area. There is about another 23 miles of undergrounding that we're doing in the gray area below the yellow. And then there's another 19 miles in that gray area that we are also looking at under evaluation. Many of you already know we have increased the capacity of some of the circuits. We had a substation that burned down, and so instead of going from 16 kV to 4 kV and then feeding customers, we're now going to be feeding customers at 16 kV, the increased capacity, so we could be able to build back stronger and be ready as you all rebuild. And then, of course, we're ensuring that we're using the latest technology, the latest automation as we're building back these circuits. Next slide. So the piece that we really want to emphasize here is as we're doing our undergrounding efforts, we will need to be going down certain routes where it could impact private property. And so this is where our contractor Spectrum Land Services will be reaching out to work with y'all. This is not Spectrum of like internet fiber. This is Spectrum Land Services. So they'll actually be reaching out to many of you where we have these kind of private property easement concerns. It's going to take a lot of cooperation to fully make this effort successful, because if we have one customer that decides to not give us easements, and it creates some issues. And so we definitely want to work closely together to make this happen in terms of trying to underground as much as we can. I'll give it back to you, Carla. Next slide.
Next slide. Thank you. And then just wanted to flag this resource. We are still co-located at the Altadena Disaster Recovery Center. We are there regularly. The address is on your screen. We have energy advisors and planners that are there for any questions you might have specifically about your rebuild. You can also call us at the number 1-800-250-7339 to connect to these resources. We'll make sure the supervisor's office has this deck to share out. There's a link to the Rebuild Essential Guide brochure, which is also on our website. And lastly, we wanted to flag the resource Edison for the Record, which is also linked on our website, that responds to regularly asked questions that we're receiving and our response to some of the news articles that have come out, providing additional information. Next slide, please. Lastly, as mentioned in the first slide, we really want to hear from you. We have a survey in terms of what your top priorities are and continuing to help us as we plan for all of the undergrounding that we have planned. As Robert mentioned, we currently have 63 miles in the planning phase and are evaluating additional 19 miles. So hearing from you in terms of what is top of mind and top priorities for you to inform our rebuild plans is a top priority for us. We hope that you will take this survey and fill it out and let us know your thoughts. That is all from us. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will transition to the question and answer portion of our evening. The following questions were submitted ahead of tonight's community meeting, and we will answer as many of them as we can in the allotted time. As a reminder, you can find answers to frequently asked questions on recovery.lacounty.gov/Altadena. We will, in a moment, also be putting up the Zoom QR code on the screen. Zoom participants can also submit questions in real time using the Q&A function at the bottom of their screen. Anyone who is on YouTube who would like to submit questions, we encourage you to hop onto the Zoom meeting using the QR code on your screen. Our first question is for SBA. Corey, if I take out an SBA loan and choose to make incremental payments during the 12-month payment deferral period, will that trigger the start of regular monthly payments, or will the full deferral period still apply?
So the full deferment period will still apply. What I would recommend is that that person who's thinking about making the payments, just put them aside in a savings account and make those payments to the savings account. So by the end of the 12 months, you can turn around and make one large payment at the end of the deferment period. But one thing that I've also come across too is a lot of people have already received the disbursement. They're kind of regretting a little bit that they got the disbursement so early. So if you're in a position where you can not take that first disbursement immediately, what I would recommend to do is go ahead and stretch that out as much as possible. So by the time the end of the deferment period comes, or by the time the debris removal and all the other stuff is done, you will have been able to maximize that 12-month deferment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corey. Our next question is for Regional Planning, Director Bodek. I understand that cesspools are now allowed for like fire rebuilds. I'm rebuilding a pool house, which was previously 800 square feet with 2 bathrooms and a kitchen. It will now be 1,200 square feet ADU with 2 bathrooms and a kitchen, and I'll be living in it during the main house reconstruction. Will this be considered like for like? And if my cesspool is certified, can I continue using it?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that question. I hate saying this, but this is going to be a it depends answer. The first thing that I would say is that, yes, you can take the pool house and not rebuild it and instead rebuild or build a new ADU. We would not consider that like for like because the square footage is different. However, you can replace the pool house with a brand new ADU, and the ADU can still be a 1,200 square foot ADU. So even though you're not, ADUs are a little bit different, so I'll just say that for simplified purposes. It also depends on whether you're going to live in the ADU first while you rebuild your primary residence, as to how the cesspool can be certified. Unfortunately, the county does not certify the cesspools or have responsibility or oversight over the cesspools. And so I'm being advised by our folks from public health that the water board, the state water board, will be making determinations at their May meeting and will be able to answer more specific questions about your cesspool after they make their final determination. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to put my email in the chat. And if the person is online who actually asked this question, if they could email me, I'd appreciate it. And then we can get into more details about your very specific situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bodick. And is there a number or anywhere on your website that folks can call or look at when they have specific questions?
Specifically for rebuilds, yes, I can get you an email address and a phone number. We are fielding both an email inbox and phones for specific questions. We do have walk-in traffic that's available at the Altadena One Stop at 464 Woodbury. And then we're also making consultation appointments for one-on-one consultation appointments with the 4 permitting departments. In the case of the cesspools, though, if you are going to do a consultation appointment, I would suggest that you wait until after the state has had their May board meeting so that we can get the most up-to-date information on that cesspool. And I'll put all that information in the chat.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our next question, which is for the Army Corps. It has been communicated to some property owners that phase 2 consists of 2 parts. Part 1 involving the removal of burned debris, and Part 2 focusing on the removal of ash and soot. Can you confirm if this is accurate?
All right. So I wouldn't quite phrase it as Part 1 and Part 2. What I would say is that there are a number of steps that are part of removing the debris and getting to what we call final sign-off. So, for example, EPA in phase 1 was supposed to remove household hazardous material. There are some parcels where they were not able to do that based off of, not being able to access the site for safety reasons or for, one or more, different possible reasons. So if they didn't, remove the household hazardous material, then, our contractors will go ahead and do that. They then go on to make the site safe, right? If there are situations where there's a hazard, a safety concern for folks going on to their parcel, then we're going to make that site safe. And I should note that there's not a notification prior to doing that. It's a safety concern, and it needs to be mitigated. We also do hazardous site assessments. We do asbestos testing. If there's asbestos on the property, then there's asbestos abatement. From there, there's a notification to the property owner. In the past, I think it's been called a 72-hour notification. The reality is it may be a little bit longer before that as well. The bottom line is that there's a notification to the homeowner, though. And then from there, we do debris removal, tree removal or a waiver. If there's a tree that the property owner wants to keep, then there's a waiver available for that. We do hydro mulching and erosion control, and then we'll do a final walkthrough and a final sign off for that property. So it's not quite 2 parts. It's more a series of steps that each property has to go through in order to be complete with the process.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our next question for Scott with the Assessor's Office. Is the 10% square footage buffer still in place for a like-for-like rebuild, or do we need to stick to the pre-fire square footage to maintain our tax basis, given that now we're told additional footage will be assessed at market rates?
So a number of things here. Yes, that is correct. We don't have a like for like. We don't have the same standard like for like. We have a standard that's called substantially equivalent, and so and there are actually two standards under that. One is 120% of value. So if you build your property and it is within 120% of the value before the home was damaged at the time of rebuild, then there will be no additional reassessment, regardless of square footage. If it's just square footage, that's a different standard, and that is pretty equivalent within, pretty much equal square footage. Otherwise, we reassess the additional square footage. That's the general standard we're going by. Now, you should know that we are sponsoring a piece of legislation that will allow us to align with the 110% rule. And so that is moving forward, and we're hopeful that that will be passed in this legislative cycle by September or October. And that should be in time for any rebuilds, and that's that's looking promising at this point. And that's about all I have to report on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question is for Rob with the California Department of Insurance. It reads, my insurance company provided a structural repair estimate that included drywall, plaster, and insulation replacement, based on recommendations from 2 previous adjusters. However, a new adjuster informed me that the estimate was an error and will no longer be honored. What steps should I take next?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So this one is pretty complex, to tell you the truth. It can't really provide a general answer for this, especially if that estimate was sent. They're saying that the estimate was sent in error. So we need to investigate that situation, unfortunately. So this person, if they are online right now, they really do need to give us a call at our 800 number and do what's called a request for assistance, so we can investigate the case, see where the communication
recording in progress.
See where the communication kind of broke down, what was sent in error. Because I mean, the adjuster does have the power to adjust those estimates that were previously sent, but it sounds like they're totally disregarding that previous estimate. So yeah, in this case, they really do need to give us a call at our 800 number. And the number again is 1-800-927-4357.
Thank you very much. Our next question is for SoCal Edison. I have not occupied my home since the Eaton fires, yet my current bill is $187. Despite reviewing it carefully, I find the billing details difficult to understand. Can you provide clarity on how the billing process works or why I'm receiving this bill?
I'm happy to take that one. So we know that the billing piece can be incredibly challenging. We've implemented some emergency customer protections, such as protection from disconnections, waived fees, expedited move-in, move-out requests for eligible customers, and provided a one-time bill forgiveness for residential customers whose homes have been destroyed or sustained major damage. So we hope this will reduce some of the burden on customers in our communities that have already lost so much. In regards to your specific bill, I recommend stopping by the Altadena Disaster Recovery Center. We have folks there that can talk you through your bill specifically. We're ready to support you with any bill questions there. You can also call the phone number we had, our disaster hotline, at 1-800-250-7339. Those are 2 resources where they can specifically address your questions on your bill.
Thank you. And I see Scott with DCBA has his hand raised. Scott, did you have something to add to what Carla said or what Rob was saying with the previous question?
My sincere apologies. I do not have any questions on my end. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Our next question is for regional planning. We've received conflicting information about like-for-like rebuilds. The one-stop permit shop mentions it's either 110% of the original size or 200 square feet, whichever is greater. Can you clarify, and is there documentation for the 200 square foot rule?
Hi, thank you very much. It's an excellent question. They're not conflicting, and the 200 square foot rule is to help smaller properties benefit from some level of expansion. If you've got a 3,000 square foot home, then you can add 300 square feet. If you have a 1,000 square foot home, you really only get to add 100 square feet, which is really not enough for you to build much more than, you know, maybe a small closet or just push out your kitchen wall a little bit. So because of that, we are allowing those smaller homes to have a minimum, you know, they get the benefit of 200 extra square feet no matter what. So for that 1,000 square foot home, they can either do 10%, which would be 100 square feet, or they can do 200 square feet, whichever is greater. So that gives them the flexibility to just expand a little bit more. And again, the reason we did that was because Altadena and Pasadena have some smaller homes. I know that the like for like seems really confusing because the answer changes based on an individual circumstance. And it's been difficult for us to communicate that that is flexibility that has been built in to allow each individual their choices. We did weigh when this ordinance was built, whether we would just say nobody gets to expand and you either build what you have or you just do a completely new design. But there are necessary code requirements or upgrades that might require you to do additional square footage. And every single person in Altadena and in the unincorporated Santa Monica Mountains may have a different parcel size. They may have conflicts on their property because they have a slope, a retaining wall they want to keep, an oak tree that they want to leave alone, or your parcel is irregularly shaped. So we cannot create a single regulation that's going to benefit all 10,000 folks. So I do appreciate that the like for like can be confusing, but oddly, we're trying to create some flexibility so that everybody can get a little bit something out of this. We recognize that none of you wanted to be in this situation. Nobody asked to be in this situation. Nobody wanted their house burned down so that they could rebuild their dream home. So we are trying to provide flexibility, and unfortunately, it is creating unnecessary frustration. So we are going to be putting out some best practices and some infographics to show what is allowed and what isn't allowed for like, and try to capture that as much as possible. But I do appreciate your question on the 10% or 200 square feet. Hopefully that answered it. If not, email me. It's in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bodek, and thank you everyone for joining us. That's all the time that we have for questions today. For those of you on Zoom, when you exit this meeting, you will have the opportunity to provide your email address if you'd like to receive follow-up information. For additional information, visit your local disaster recovery center or visit us online at recovery.lacounty.gov /Altadena.